The bar was low-lit, tucked between a pharmacy and an antique bookstore, the kind of place where nobody asked questions, and the staff poured strong drinks and let people keep their ghosts in peace. She had come here 3 times a week every week. For months, and not once had anyone recognized her, not once had anyone said her name, not once had anyone whispered anything close to her call sign. She wore jeans, boots, a simple gray shirt, her jacket hung over the back of the stool, and her drink of choice was neat and amber and silent like hearth. Regulars knew her only as Tess. She did not correct them, and she never offered more. Tonight was supposed to be just like the others, quiet background music, low conversation, the occasional clink of a glass, but then the man at table 6, Araved, walked in without hesitation, his gait calm and clean, and practiced like someone who had spent years learning how to move without being watched, and then more years learning how to disappear. Complete Lytis noticed him, but said nothing. Her training had long ago taught her how to watch without moving, how to calculate without reacting, how to measure a threat in fractions of a second. Sat alone, ordered water, and waited 15 minutes. Passeth in 20. On the 23rd minute, he rose, walked across the floor, and sat beside her. She did not look at him. Not at first. You look bored, he said. You like bored, she replied, smiled, but there was something off about it, like a soldier trying to remember how to smile in civilian skin. Lifted his glass, set it down, leaned in just enough for her to hear, but not enough to draw attention. 3 words, tested, was all he said, but they were not just any 3 words, they were the words, the kind that only meant something to someone who had once been part of the circle, the kind of phrase that bypassed casual memory and drilled straight into the neural wiring left behind by war, by loyalty, by buried orderstis, frozen not visibly but incidively. Instinct, every memory, every dormant reflex stirred awake. She looked at him, then really looked, and saw what she had missed before. The slight scar above the left eyebrow, the tension in his jaw, the way his right hand never moved far from the edge of the table. Was not just some man, he was a sealand. He knew exactly who she was. We now she Eskedthi sent me, he said. Nobody sends anyone any more. Not officialithis isn't officialthin. What is it kind of thing that requires people who don't officially exist? As turned back to her drink, her mind running through a dozen scenarios, none of them good, all of them urgent, had buried her past deep and far away for reasons that had once seemed inubit. Those 3 words, they had not come from memory. They had come from the blacklist, the silent codes, the ones that were never supposed to be used again unless everything else had failed. You're here for me, she said. Not at ho bad, worse than anything we trained for, worse than anything we saw. Worse than what made you disappear. She let that sit between them for a moment, then she stood, pulled on her jacket, left a 50 on the bar, and walked out the door without looking back. Followed outside. The air was colder than it should have been. For spring, the streets were empty, the city asleep, but Tess was wide awake, every sense tuned, every breath measured. You have a name, she asked. Adrias, of course. They walked 3 blocks in silence, turned down an alley, and stopped beside a black SUV that looked like a rental but had the kind of aftermarket tweaks only someone with clearance could access. Tess opened the passenger door but did not get in. What is the target? She Eskednet, what hush frowned name can say it out loud than write. I'd handed her a small notepad and a pencil. She wrote to words. Rise looked and not dead. That is one of them, he said. Well, else who don't know, but we know Hayes not working alone, and we know he remembers you. Tess closed her eyes for half a second. The wind picked up blue dust across the alley. When she opened them again, her face had changed, not the features, but the posture, the presence, the weight of someone who had not just worn a uniform, but had lived by it and survived when others had not. Tries watched her, and for the first time that night he looked away. Who have gear? She asked it in the back. She walked around, opened the trunk, and saw the Casa Standard issue, reinforced matte black, sealed with 2 locks that required both thumbprint and passphrase. Opened it without asking for the codine side. Was her Rignet, a copy, not a replica, her actual Writhe one she had left behind the night she walked away from the mission, from the program, from all of it. You kept it, she said. Way never stopped watching Tess. Lifted the vest, checked the seams, reattached the plates, adjusted the straps with muscle memory that had never truly left. Holstered the sidearm, then loaded the primary, the weight familiar, the grip molded to her hand like it remembered her to one. She turned back to raise her eyes were colder. You got one chance to tell me the truth, not dead, then you better get in. They climbed into the SUV and pulled away. The city vanishing behind them. Ahead was the darkened whatever waited and ith rode out of the city, curved through forgotten industrials, owns past shuttered factories and broken fences, places that no longer showed up on official maps. Tess sat in the passenger seat, silent, eyes locked on the horizon, every movement deliberate, measured. Her body adjusting again to rhythms she thought she had left behind. Rise drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting near the console, his posture relaxed, but she could see the subtle tension in his jaw, the flick of his eyes to every rear view, every intersection. He was expecting trouble. She finally spoke, start talking. Grise nodded, took a breath, and gave her the barest details. First, it began 3 weeks ago, he said, quiet, slow, a series of anomalies showing up in surveillance logs. Power spikes, unauthorized drone activity, and chatter in deep channels. Black site chatter exactly was ignored at first, flagged as noise, but one of ours caught it, recognized a pattern, was silenced before he could report it officially. And by silenced, I mean Eliminatus did not blink. Had seen it before. Operatives disappearing just before the right questions were asked. They called it coincidence a bit, only until the second one vanished and the third, and then the fourth sent out a message a bit. It was not a message to command, it was to herdo testo, the call sign no one was supposed to use again, and the message was simple, 3 words, same 3 words. Ray's whispered in the barso, this is internal. Tess said it's worse. Ray's replied it's personality. Turned onto a narrow road, unlit, cracked, a forgotten stretch that ran alongside a decommissioned bc. The gate was still there, rusted and twisted, but the fence behind it had been replaced with something newer, something embedded with Tectus noticed. The cameras instantly. They are watching. The always a rare eyes pulled up beside a shed that looked like it would collapse under a strong breezy. Stepped out, tapped a rhythm on the door with 2 fingers. 3 seconds passed, then the wall split open, revealing a hidden elevator. Inside was a small space lit in red. Tis followed. Ray's Inthi descended. 30 seconds, no words between them. When the door opened again, they were beneath ground, beneath records, beneath all oversized hallway was narrow. The lights dim as they walked. Tess saw faces, men and women in gear not marked, not labeled, not standard. They moved like ghosts. You put together a shadow cello, had no choice. Official channels were compromised. Edzi are the ones who made it out before the purge. Before what Pergethi one you missed by 48 Arstis stopped walking. Grise kept going. When she caught up, he handed her a folder marked only with a red stripe. Inside were images, grainy satellite stills, heat maps, mission logs, coded transcripts, and finally a photo. Her photo. Somione had pulled it from an old file, one that should have been sealed in the archive vault. It was tagged with the name she hadn't heard in 5 years. Net Tespit her real call signether. They know I am alive. Tess saith the always did. Ray's answered, why now Bekos, they are planning something and they know you are the only one who ever broke their pattern. They want you gone before they move. Tis closed the folder. What is the target? Still unclear, but we know it connects to the Ghost Protocol. She looked at him sharp. Ghost Protocol was scrapped. That's what they told the oversight bid. Parts of it were retained, buried in private arms contracts deep in the civilian shell. Compagnes experdonanta. Rulus the built the prototype. She esket the build threatened to have already gone. Darkness leaned against the wall, her mind shifting into strategic mode. Variables, probabilities, likely outcomes, none of them good, and the third it's moving where think towards own ekibit. The data is fragmented in we intercept. We can't do it alone. New need to activate the chain. You mean them? Iestis exhaled through her nose, slow, steady. She had not spoken to them in years. The others who walked away when she did. Team that was never officially formed but unofficially completed 7 missions that never existed. You think they will come back for you? Yes, they followed you out. They will follow you back in it. All of them made it out. The ones who did never stopped. Watching. Grise unlocked a drawer beneath the console in the operations room and pulled out 5 sealed drives. Each was marked with a different color. Each represented 1 operative. Each held a direct encrypted channel. Stared at them one by one. Blue, green, gold, black. These are real. Tests said they never went dark. They were waiting. You know the risk of activating all 5A. Don't the consequences if any are compromised. Yeshi took a deep breath, pressed her thumb to the first drive. Blinked On Sethan again message sent in the second-third foft confirmation a low chime that echoed like a heartbeat turned to rise shall long do we have less than 72 hours before tea. The desert compound where Tess once trained was buried in the shadows of a dead mountain range surrounded by miles of rock, sand, and silence, the kind of place that only ghosts remembered, and even they moved carefully. Tess arrived in a black tactical vehicle driven by a man she did not recognize, but who moved like he knew how to kill without making a sound. Others were already waiting. First was Cole, his beard longer, now eyes darker, but still carrying that calm stillness he had back in Syria. He nodded at her once, never needing words to say what they both knew, that this was not just a mission, this was retribution. Then came Maya, the only one who ever matched Tess in reflexes. She walked with a limp, now a reminder of the last stop they swore would be their last. She grinned sharp and brief and said, "You look like hell." Tess. Next was Bishop, silent and massive, moving like a shadow despite his size. He had not spoken more than a sentence at a time since the collapse of Echo Team, but his presence was always enough. Last was Vega, the tech ghost who once rewired an enemy drone midair just to crash it through a convoy window. He wore glasses now and drank black coffee like it was oxygen. He handed Tess a burner tablet with everything. They had compiled 3 prototypes, one confirmed, inoperable, one missing, the third on a direct path toward a civilian population center. Strike radius, potential casualty projection, deniability matrix, all built into the code. They were going to burn it all and blame Hearth. Call sign Ether had not been seen in 5 years, but someone had unearthed her dossier and decided to make it the final piece of their cover story. The only question was why. Cole tapped the screen. The convoy route was marked in red, traveling through Zone Echo disguised as a military logistics run, not even flagged by command, meaning command was either blind or complicit. Either way, they had to move. No sanction, no backup, no official extraction. This was off the books entirely. They were to intercept, neutralize, and vanish just like old times, Tess said, except this time if they failed, the fallout would not be buried, it would burn entire cities. They moved out before dawn, 3 black vehicles traveling off-grid using old trade routes and satellite dead zones. Maya drove the lead. Tess sat passenger. Cole and Bishop in the rear. Vega ran recon from a modified drone station built into the back of the last vehicle. Tess stared out the window as the sky shifted from black to blood orange, her fingers tapping out codes on the burner tablet, unlocking layers of encrypted files she had not touched in years. Each tap brought back memories not of the missions, but of the choicest lives taken, the ones lost, the ones they could not solve. Eshe had walked away from all of it, not because she was broken, but because she knew if she stayed, she would lose whatever was left of the person beneath the call sign. But now they wanted to use that name again, to weaponize her past, to erase the difference between what she chose and what they demanded, and that she could not. A loathed drone feed lit up. Target convoy sighted. Vega said, coordinates marked, and Relayadus leaned forward, eyes locked on the screen. 3 armored transports, 1 escort drone, and 2 bikes, standard enough to fool any satellite, but not. Tess spotted the anomalies immediate. A lino heat signature from the second transport. Demi-shelf prototype was inside. Dethi would need to breach without triggering the defensive, Khadizir said. Then Donebishot prepped the jammer. Skull loaded the static charge. Amaya adjusted her brace and slid a blade into her booth. He had 10 minutes until Interceptus sensed her calm to Vega. Jetmia bypass already on its vehicle, swerved down a side trail flanking the convoy route. Dust kicked up in plumes. They stopped on a ridge overlooking the path. From here they would strike hard and fast and disappear before the dust settled. As checked her weapon once, twice, then looked to her team. You Redial ways. Cole said, never stopped. Maya grinned. Bishop just nodded once. Vega whispered good luck into the command. Then they moved down the ridge over rock and scrub. No sound but the wind and the low hum of tires cutting dirt. Convoy rolled into Rangedus signaled no Maya through the first charge under the rear escort bike, flipping it in a spray of sparks and flame. Cole fired at the lead drone, blinding its sensors. Bishop dropped Smoketus, ran straight into the center transport, climbing onto The back with precision planted the breech pack and dropped off just as it blew the rear doors open. Inside was silent Seno crew, just the mansion's sleek black chrome, barely human in shape but unmistakably designed to mimic decision. It turned to her slowly, as if it already knew who she was. The other voice came from nowhere, and everywhere her heart froze, not fear, but recognition. Samine had programmed it with her feel, her movements, her logic. Her voice fired 2 shots directly into its sensor. Rarayat staggered back, but did not fully reached in with the charge, slammed it onto the core, and pulled Tess out just as the self-contained ignition trigger hit the dirt. Fire ripped from the transport, a burst of heat and static, then silenced. Prototype was down, but the battle was not over. The remaining bike circled back. Bishop intercepted, dropped the rider with a single strike. Vega confirmed, heat signature fading, no backup inbound yet. They had minutes. Grab what you can. Test order it out of drives. Schematics, anything not melted. Maya pulled a hard case from the ruins, tossed it to Vega, got it. Cole scanned the road clear for Naudis, looked around at her team. Blood, smoke, and breathless focus. They had won the first round, but whoever had sent that machine would not stop with one. This was bigger than she thought. They were not just framing her, they were testing her. Next strike would not be a setup, it would be war. She looked at the wreckage, then at the horizon end. She knew other was back. The smoke from the burned-out transport still lingered like a warning over the desert floor, but Tess and her team were already moving. They had pulled what they could from the wreckage, but the mission was far from over, and the next move would not be theirs to make. It would be made by whoever had built that prototype and whoever had programmed it. To say her name, the back of the vehicle. Vega worked fast, decrypting the recovered drive, sweat rolling down his temples as code scrolled in waves across his screens. Tess sat beside him, watching every frame, every line, her eyes scanning for a pattern, something to tell her where this trail led, something to tell her who knew about Ether. Bishop drove quietly while Maya rested in the passenger seat, her legs stiff but her hands still close to her blade. Cole sat behind them, gun cradled in his lap, eyes on the rear view, always watching, always waiting. Tess trusted them all with her life, but even that trust was a fragile thing now, because someone somewhere knew them, knew her, knew how they operated, and was staying at least one step ahead. Vega cursed under his breath. Wait, he muttered, wait, this is not just code. Tess, this is a map of what she eskednet, where the prototype was built, but where the next one is going. Turned the screen toward here, a facility outside Ramstein, not marked on any records, but flagged under a black tier funding string, completely off the grid. German airspace, she muttered, which means we go silent. Cole said no comms, no air cover, no mistake. As the team drove through the night, stopping once to refuel using an old contact Tess barely remembered from her years under deep cover. He did not ask questions. He handed her keys to a low-profile utility van and disappeared into the dust like he had never been there. At the next border, they split into pairs, Bishop and Vega by train, Tess, Cole, and Maya by air. Commercial, low risk, no weapons, no gear, just cash and quiet confidence. In Frankfurt, they regrouped. Tess changed her hair color, cut it short, dressed like a civilian who belonged in no place long enough to be noticed. At the move to Ramstein and her layered identities, Vega creating false credentials on the fly with a precision that reminded Tess why she had once called him her shield. Facility was buried beneath an old logistics warehouse guarded by private contractors, not military, not local, but American-born, clean-shaven, fast-twitch eyes, and quick radios. Contractors, Tess said, which means there are flesh. And Maya went in first, posing as shipment inspectors, while Cole and Bishop stayed parked 2 blocks away, watching the exits inside the warehouse. The air smelled like chemicals, and Metaltas could feel the hum of power beneath the floor, the kind that meant more than lights and refrigeration. Cracked the internal network from a coffee shop 4 blocks away, whispering timestamps into Tess's ear through a bone mic. Lift corridor, 3rd door, file room 12, guard stake 10 seconds to reroute. Camera you have 20 to move. Tess walked casual but quick, scanned the hallway and made the turn. Maya blocked the view, leaning against a vending machine, smiling at the guards and asking for help in broken German. By the time they looked away, Tess Was in file room was smaller than she expected. Older tech paper files, a single desktop computer wover was running this op, was doing it analog. Smarch took photos of everything, eyes scanning for familiar terms. She found it on the third shelf. Project Revenant, multiple iterations of biomech prototypes. First 3 failed, 4th was successful, 5th was activation marked unknown, 6th was scheduled for field test, and 36 are started unspecified, but the deployment vector included. Europesh downloaded everything, slipped out as Maya laughed too loudly and waved at the guards, who now looked both confused and strangely charmed. Outside, the sun was falling and the streets were starting to glow in the amber light of the city. Cole met them at the corner, eyes sharp. Get what we need. We got more than that. Tess said. Way got the next target. They regrouped at a safe house Tess had not used since the Berlin incident. They moved into Berlin as shadows, wearing smiles and false names, each step calculated, each movement rehearsed. Tess walked through the glass doors of the summit wearing a dress and a diplomatic badge and a past that no scanner could detect. She felt the eyes on her like heat, but none of them knew what they were looking at. None of them knew who they had just let in behind her. Maya posed as her attached. Cole played her detail. Bishop circled the perimeter in a maintenance uniform while Vega monitored every signal flowing through the building from a van parked down a side street, his fingers moving like fire over his keys as he watched the network. Breathy were inside the last place anyone thought she would be. The last place anyone expected Ether to return. Summit bustled with officials, generals, advisors, and tech giants, all shaking hands, all selling something invisible and deadly. Tess smiled at them all as she drifted through the crowd, her ears tuned to murmurs. Her eyes always watching. She felt it before she saw it, the shift in air, the sudden spike in signal, the quiet space around. A single man standing near the server bank in a black suit, and no Namesh recognized him, not by his face, but by his stance. She had seen him before in a briefing long ago, his file sealed, redacted, burned, and buried, but not for Gotenkeller had overseen black tier programs that were never meant to exist. He had signed the first requisition for the Revenant prototypes. He had ordered her file opened again, and now he stood within reach. As moved past him, slowly brushing his shoulder with a whisper. You forgot who trained the machinery. A turn to late. Bishop activated the distraction, a floor above, fire alarms in one wing, security doors locking, protocol chaos. In less than a minute, Maya slipped through the crowd and lifted a keycard from Keller, while Cole intercepted a plainclothes agent drawing a concealed weapon, neutralizing him without sound. Tess and Maya disappeared into the secure wing, while Vega killed the feeds, rerouting everything through a decoy node. They reached the lab beneath the stage, where the prototype was held in a stasis unit humming with quiet menace. It was taller than the others, reinforced armor, more fluid in its design, and it moved even in sleep, as if it could smell them, as if it was dreaming of war. Maya hesitated for the first time. What if it activates? It will, Tess said, if we don't shut it down first. Vega whispered through their comms. Now teams inbound, 2 minutes tops. Tess cracked the panel, began overriding the control code, while Maya covered the door. The code fought back, resisting like a living thing. Countermeasures, firing scripts designed to trace, corrupt, and destroy it. Tess was faster. She was not just a pilot, not just a weapon. She had written some of the early design principles for aerial command logic. Her fingerprints were still buried in the system even after they wiped her name, and then the unit began to open. Steam hissed cold and sharp as the casing split and the machine stepped forward, towering and gleaming in matte black steel, its sensors glowing blue. It looked at Tess, and it Posideth's voice was hers, synthetic and perfect and wrong. Maya raised her weapon. Oh, Tess said. She stepped forward. The prototype moved again, 1 step, 2, then stop it, stand down. Tess said. The prototype twitched, voice command override initiated. The machine said processing and subroutine detected. Air off lights in the lab flickered. Vega swore as the signal surged. It's trying to sync with Herkit. The power. Maya said can't. Vega shouted not. Rimateleth machine tilted its head. Tess reached into her coat, pulled a cord disruptor, a last resort device keyed to her Biometrics pressed it against the machine's chest. Final command, Test Said Alpha 0 Echo 7 3 strike. The machine hesitated, then it collapsed. Its body spasmed once and then went still. Maya exhaled. They're breaching the building, Vega said. We have maybe 30 seconds. Tess grabbed the hard drive from the control unit and they ran, retracing their path through service tunnels, slipping past confused security and fire crews until they burst into the alley where Bishop and Cole waited. In the van, engine running, doors opened. They drove fast and silent, changing vehicles twice before reaching the exfil point where a private jet waited on a decommissioned strip east of the city. As they climbed aboard, Tess looked back once at the Skyline would survive, she knew, and he would come, but he no longer controlled the board. She had seen the files. There were more than sixth program was global. No, but they had the data, they had the proof, and they had an amine the cabin. Vega plugged in the drive. While Maya leaned back, eyes closed, and Bishop cleaned a fresh cut on his hand, Cole sat across from Tess, watching her with that look again, the one that said he knew she was already thinking ahead. This isn't over, he said. No, Tess replied, this is just beginning. Beckos, they had called her back with 3 words. They had awakened something they could not contain, and no other was no longer theirs. The jet cut through the clouds like a scalpel, heading west into low light and deep sky. The cabin was quiet except for the hum of flight and the soft keystrokes from Vega, who had already broken the first layer of encryption on the drive. Tess watched the data unfold, line after line of code, signatures, sequences, access points, and names. Some she recognized, some she had only ever seen whispered through channels that no longer existed. Maya stood near the door, her eyes scanning the sky behind them through reinforced glass. Cole sat quietly but alert, one hand on his weapon and the other resting on the case that held a spare disruptor. Just in Bishop was on the comms, low voice, calm, focused, relaying updates through back channels to a ghost network that had once been theirs before it was taken apart piece by piece and sold to the highest bidders. Leaned forward and stared at the screen. The drive was not just a blueprint, it was a roadmap. It traced the movement of assets and prototypes across borders, through fake shell companies, through humanitarian shipments and diplomatic pouches. It linked governments, private contractors, rogue units, and sleeper agents, all orbiting the same center, and in the middle of it all a name, not Keller Lazarus. None of them spoke when it appeared on the screen. They just stared, each knowing what it meant. Had been a myth even when Tess had still worn the uniform, a story told to justify missing assets or unexplained strikes, a theory some said, a legend others believed, but never proven until now. Lazarus had not only survived, he had built an empire using what the governments had buried, what the cores had discarded, and what the black budgets had failed to control. Had taken revenant tech and evolved it beyond anything Tess had seen. She watched one of the embedded video feeds on the drive showing a prototype dropping into a conflict zone in North Africa, moving like liquid shadow, dismantling an entire battalion in silence. Footage was time-stamped to weeks. Agatha were not just late, they were behind, and worse, the pattern in the data showed expansion, not testing. Product daily. If the estimate was correct, more than a dozen active units were already in place around the world, embedded, ready, waiting for activation. Codestus sat back and closed her eyes. For a second she had come back for one mission, one extraction, to stop one threat, but no. She opened her eyes again, and the weight of it settled on her shoulders. This was a warrant future, not coldnet hypothetical. This was real, and it had already started. The jet landed under cover of night in a private field carved into the hills of an unnamed territory, where allies waited in the dark, silent, efficient, prepared by a message sent hours earlier through encrypted pulses. And her team moved quickly into the stone compound buried into the hillside, far from cities and signals inside. They met with the handler known only as Iris, an older woman with eyes that had seen too much and a voice that never rose above a whisper. Confirmed what Tess already feared. The prototypes were being activated in clusters in regions where chaos would hide them, where war already burned and no one would question the smoke. Lazarus was pushing the world toward collapse, not with armies but with precision. Cheo Sand, he was winning. Garrus handed Tess a new file 6 nodes, 6 hubs of activity that formed a rough perimeter around a central location deep in the Caucasus Mountains where Iris believed the main facility was hidden. Reach them, she said, stop them before they trigger Cascaditis. Knew what that meant, a full-scale protocol to unleash every asset, every machine, every ghost that Lazarus had built. No reset, no rollback, no survivors. Looked at her team, at Cole, at Maya, at Bishop, and Vega, each of them nodding without needing the words. They prepped within hours, moving fast, repacking gear, switching identities again. Tess shedding her diplomat face for something leaner, colder, something closer to what she had been before. A third word was no longer a call signet, was a warning. The split into 2 teams, Cole and Bishop taking the eastern corridor, while Tess led Maya and Vega west, hitting 2 of the 6 nodes. Simultaneous live missions were precise and brutal. In Greece, they intercepted a convoy carrying neural loadouts meant for drone integration. Tess fired the first shot using a sniper perch built into the ruins of a monastery in Kazakhstan. Cole walked through a sandstorm to place demolition charges under a forward base designed to mimic a refugee camp in Istanbul. Maya posed as an arms dealer, while Vega cracked the internal server from a stolen phone inside a bathroom. Stealthy move like ghost, silent and untraceable, but each strike brought consequence. In the 4th node, Vega took a hit to the side and they had to abandon their safe house. In the 5th, a satellite picked up their heat signatures and a predator drone tailed them for 3 hours before they ditched it in a canyon pass using decoy